early on in the war, a lot of people were super enthusiastic. A lot of those people are dead now. Like early on, there was like a very strong patriotic response.
But even before
that
that,
exists.
Even before that, again, a friend of mine who's in Ukraine is, he's not like part of the oligarchy, but he's a, he owns like 3 or 4 businesses. Dude's done well for himself, and he's connected politically in Dnipro. His oldest son died, and his other son is in the war. Like,
You lost good. Wow.
How'd you get?
I have your intro video logo on screen so people know who I'm talking to, at least. You watched I don't even know if it's a response necessarily, more talking about the idea and mostly the critiques I saw of you that I was really surprised to see.
I didn't get to a part where I saw the actual critiques, or if you addressed those. I think I got to...
I didn't go into any specific ones. And more just the general, like, apparently you're not allowed to say some things. And it's like, what the fuck? It was very strange.
Yeah, I was interested that you brought up that you have a different take on conscription than me, because I actually suspect you don't.
I do. I probably do. I mean, again,
I actually suspect we probably have a similar. It's like I doubt it's going to be exactly the same, but I suspect we have probably a very similar one. So, for example, like for me, in the event of like at the cusp of the war, Ukraine finds itself with its pants down. Conscription under those circumstances makes sense.
Yes,
and you rationalize it under the terms where it's like similarly, like modern day work is exploitative. It's actually continuous in certain really important respects with the institution of slavery. Nonetheless, maintaining modern day work is not exactly equivalent to chattel slavery. There's a certain acceptability in terms of like, this is sort of a way of things. And to a certain minimum extent, you kind of have to go with that, regardless of sort of where you are in the chain. Not like in absolute terms. Like there are ways in which things can be made better, and there are ways in which things can be critiqued and so on and so forth. But like stuff doesn't change like that. And if a state is attacked, unfortunately, the state is the technology that protects the people in those circumstances. And if it has to conscript in order to do that, yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of pragmatically justified. I understand that.
Okay.
There's a temporary confluence.
I very much got the opposite feeling from watching you, and maybe I misunderstood generally.
Go for it.
That like conscription is always bad.
No, I think conscription into perpetuity, especially under conditions of there are people who want to leave the country. Years have gone by. It is very obvious that there is not a symmetry between the interests of the leadership and the interests of the population. That under those conditions, it starts to look very much like an institution of slavery.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay. If you want to take a nuanced view, I'm going to try to steelman your argument a bit.
All right.
Now that we are multiple years into this, and there is a lot more happening where, like I was comparing it, and I think it's fair, because I'm talking about it the same way that Zelensky is. It's Korea forever war, vassal state. Like I think once you start in a place where it's like the ongoing threats seem to be diminished, yet you have this conscription that's happening. You have a thing that is very fucked up in terms of like what it looks like, and you could find ways to compare. I think you should not use the comparison you do personally. I'm just saying, like, I get the language being polemic.
Oh yeah,
but
which was that? Just a reminder.
Slavery.
Sorry,
slavery. That it's like slavery. Now it seems like has images of but that it is slavery is.
It has evocation. I'm going to agree with you. It has evocations that I think sort of confound what I'm trying to convey. Which is
right.
Like,
and again, you're not against the practical. Someone's coming on to us. Someone's attacking us.
No, obviously,
and we've got to defend, and you're not going to jump up. You're an able-bodied fighting guy. Get the fuck in there, asshole, or go to jail. Like, again, I'm not for this, but I'm also not against this.
Well, for me, it's like where it gets fuzzy, right? is when it ends up being an oligarchy that is pushing poor people from poor villages to do that. Now it's like a slightly
Right.
different story. And I do want to clarify too, like my principal issue and one of the reasons why it got so heated was not because people defended conscription. I understand the defense of conscription. I understand even leftists who recognize, for example, like the intrinsic like class exploitation within a state where oligarchs send their kids abroad. They're taking TikToks of themselves. Like, thank God it's the age of social media. People can see that this is going on. But they're not invested. they're safe
Right.
regardless of the outcome. And it's normal Ukrainians who are disillusioned and don't want to fight the oligarchs battle.
There's some of that. Like, this is where the reality
Yes.
of every single person is incredibly complicated,
Mhm.
and the people on the ground and how they're acting. And some kids do want to, but others really shouldn't be, and others are very much not the type who should.
Well,
be
it's
going
mixed
out
up.
there.
It's mixed up by the fact too that like early on in the war, a lot of people were super enthusiastic. A lot of those people are dead now. Like early on, there was like a very strong patriotic responance.
But even before
still
that,
exists.
even before that, again, a friend of mine who's in Ukraine is, he's not like part of the oligarchy, but he's he owns like 3 or 4 businesses. Dude's done well for himself, and he's connected politically in Dnipro. His oldest son died, and his other son is in the war. Like, the idea that like, and again, I'm not saying people can't find ways to get out. I'm sure there are people slinking their way out of everywhere. But like, as a general rule, I'm not sure how true it is that it's the same as like with Vietnam in America, where rich kids got out of it all the time, joining this or that. There's that I'd have to see that there's a policy, because I know too many people that like, I know at least one guy who's absolutely not adverse to helping his kids out, who lost a kid and has another kid who might die. And that's where I'm like, maybe this isn't quite as hardcore as you're saying, right?
Well, I think the issue here though is like the oligarchs that we're talking about here are like up top. It's a bit more different when you get to the like sort of the trickle down effects of like people being able to pay the person immediately above them for a note.
No, right. Well, this is the lived reality of people there, how they can do stuff. But again, that's to me, that's like, the way I understood as you were talking about it. And it's, again, I've watched it. I was not exactly in the best mental place. So if I took something from it, feel free. I was going back and forth watching my father possibly die in a bed in hospital.
I think we're both, for our own personal reasons, in a similar position, which is one of the reasons why I was hesitant to talk about this with you on stream. But
so the way that it was sort of,
but I liked your take from what I saw for the first 30 or so minutes. So
good.
I was that,
Lucy and Oz seem to disagree with it significantly, so we'll see how that turns out.
I'm not surprised.
But it's one of those things that's like, when we start talking about the way that society is built that enables people who have various privileges of getting out of stuff, I'm not going to like disagree that exists. But when it's stated as this is what they're doing, and we start having that conversation where the words start becoming they, hint, 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 hint. It's a little conspiracy. I do it too. Don't get me wrong. I do exactly this, but it's that little part of my brain that goes, it's a little conspiracy brained when it's everywhere. There's some level of this.
I disagree to a point, because I think what happens though is when you're talking about, for example, a relationship of oppression, there is an intrinsic binaristic sort of element to that, and so when you say they, you're pointing upwards. It's a shorthand way of pointing upwards. I agree. It doesn't convey the nuance that you need to actually address this, but it's like it's something you easily fall into. I wouldn't say I'm falling into conspiratorial thinking per se. Of course, I would say that. I just think that I'm a little bit, you know what I mean?
It's corruption is very different in someone's mentioned it, corruption, bad states, bad, all that's fine. But like, I think, and this is, again, I'm trying to more steel man the position. It's not so much that we're talking about, because corruption's different in every state and every country in hilarious ways, where you spend a little bit of time and you go, hey, in Ukraine, the idea that business people and the local, mafia of sorts, as well as the DA, all go to the same clubs and hang out. It's like, that's corruption. Well, yeah, but they do that here in the States too. And is it corruption? How do we talk? Like these conversations, that's for me where it's like, where is the systemic element that can be discussed or that can be evaluated? And that's why I keep pushing back on like I don't want to necessarily get into too many specifics of like what Ukraine is doing or whatever, but the way that the position Zelensky's in, and again, I will say it, I sort of said it just to restate from earlier, I don't envy the position he's in, whatever, whatsoever. I think it's a horrifying thing. The stuff he's doing, I don't fault him personally, because this is the
you can't fault him personally.
This is the structure of how everything works. And the way that Ukraine is being turned into effectively a vassal defense military compound state, that's not Ukraine. It's not even America, really. Like, this is a very different, like...
No, it's a super complicated set of, like, coalescing social forces that are beyond any of these things.
Yeah, and it's... When we talk about, like, specifically the conscription thing, I think is one of the things that I ended up getting stuck on. So maybe and it's good to know, like, because I think someone actually said to you, have you talked to Brooks about this take? You said, I think Brooks would agree. I went, oh no. Because I not that I was certain I didn't agree with you on it, just to be very fair. I was certain I didn't agree because I guess I misunderstood what was being stated. But
well, if I may,
please.
And this is probably, I need to find a better way of doing this, because it's something I'm sort of working through, but it's simultaneously something that sort of puts an urgency to the way the conversation is had, and having a realistic appraisal of the actual stakes involved in my part in that conversation, which are very small, is something I struggle with because I'm in my own head and everything seems really big.
Join the club.
You're encountering it for the first time,
well, and again, as I said, and I think this is the one thing I said to you, personally about it was very quick. This is one of those things that I couldn't find a great deal of writing on this critique of Ukraine, and it's a fair critique. It's overall the commentary about, like, here's how vassal states get developed. We're witnessing it in real time. Hey, we've got to be careful not turning this into the
well. It's interesting.
New
I hadn't
Israel.
Actually considered that angle. That was actually a really interesting angle. I actually ordered that book after I listened to that segment of what you were talking about.
It's a really depressing book. It's really depressing.
That's every book you recommend, Brooks.
That's fair. Actually,
it's not true. That's not true. Some of them are good.
They're all good. They're just all sad.
I disagree. Some of them are really positive. I actually think I find Bergson, Deleuze, Nietzsche.
Fair enough. I'm more talking about, like, my history books are all like the worst.
Well, yeah, but that's because they're written by historians.
Well, and we're not seeing quite yet. There are conversations I think worth having when it comes to how the U.S. handled Ukraine early on, because, my opinion is early on that actually Ukraine is, I don't know how else to phrase it, but they didn't do what they needed to do to end this quickly. And that's because I think the U.S. and Biden and, the people that were in power didn't have the same vitriol of Putin or Russia.
Well, there's
a reality that if Hillary, God damn it, if Hillary,
who fucking cares if you get that right, to be honest with you.
But if Hillary was, for example, president when this happened, her vitriol and anger and neoconservative warmongering might have actually been a very good thing for this in reality, because she would have wanted them to go really hard and she would have encouraged that. And that type of encouragement, I think, again, and I'm rewriting history here, but I think the way that various leaders have handled this and encouraged or discouraged certain actions, and the position that has put Zelensky and Ukraine in, it mirrors far too much for me what happened with the Philippines, for example, or what happened with Korea.
Well, I think, look, I'm gonna like, there's a shorthand way of conceding to your point, and I don't think I've actually ever disagreed with it necessarily. I was about to get into why it may seem that way initially, but like the fact that Zelensky had to go into the White House and just get fucking not even really humiliated because Trump looked embarrassing, but had to go through this humiliation ritual with Trump, where you have this weird baby-faced man-child going, didn't you say thank you? Didn't you say... And it's like, why you wear a suit? It's like, why are you wearing a suit? Aren't you supposed to be in kindergarten? Like I do not think Zelensky is a free man who is choosing the hand that
Ukraine
has
is
been served to him.
Ukraine is,
Yeah.
I mean, in my time there, I kind of have learned, first off, and this is all, let me just sort of unload my ignorance of things. I'm going to be admitting how stupid I was about stuff, which is fine. It is not a small country.
No.
It is deceptive on maps. It is deceptive in experience. But the reality is Kiev to Dnipro to, oh God, where's Dendi living these days? To the eastern, to Western Bloc, where like Lucy goes into, or like Poland side.
Mhm.
These are effectively three drastically different countries that are
think,
united in a
yeah.
very unique way.
Yeah.
And that size of it, the scale of it, the interpersonal and interconnected setups that are, you know, left over from the USSR's weird hyper domination of some places, and also the way that like it resisted in other ways. Like Ukraine's fucking fascinatingly complicated. And so the position he's in, having to defend against Russia, and I think it's fair to say
have you read Plocky's like history of Ukraine?
not all of
first
it,
book,
no.
no.
But no, we
like,
talked about it lately.
It's super. I mean, like, I'm going to be real. Like, the closer you get to contemporary stuff, Plocky's kind of sucks. But the long form view, super interesting. It's like it's basically everywhere in some level. It's really interesting.
No,
it is not
I
one
agree.
thing at all. Yeah,
but this is the one of the things I was saying, and it's really important that I really don't like the language where we talk about Ukraine as if it started with this war. Like this is what we do now. People talk about, oh, look at Ukraine. All of this started when blah. It's like, no.
Yes.
This is.
Oh, by the way, I appear to be peaking. Apparently, according to some people, I don't know if that's
their fault.
I mean, I think it's probably my sense.
I just fixed you.
Okay.
I'm also peaking, so whatever.
Okay.
They can fuck off. So the historical realities, like, let's just talk about, like, I think the most relevant stuff is the stuff that happened right around when Yeltsin turned Russia into USSR into Russia and became capital land, and all these states broke apart, but they, like, everything that happened and the way that things were divided up amongst people and how it operated, and all of the leftovers from the USSR and how it exists in time, that all, and again, that's just a tiny part of this incredibly massive history, this insane history for this region. That thing that's happening, that's the challenge of the position that Ukraine's now in, and having to navigate all that, because it's not like it's weirdly corrupt, like the Ukrainian people are naturally more corrupt. They were built out of the same weird state building apparatus that Yeltsin built everything else with. And so as such, you have this really weird oligarchical, like, background to things. You know, again, the US has its own fucking stupid version of this, but like, understanding that on top of everything, it's one of the reasons why I was really sympathetic to the idea of one, pushing back on the idea that it is a litmus test of uncritical support for Ukraine, like Dylan Burns was talking about it. I fucking hate that. Like, I think it's terrible. And I think the mentality around that is really awful. That kind of thing is,
well, it's pitting victims of imperialism against each other for the sake of, frankly, squeezing out actual leftists in American politics, which is my principal issue with what Dylan Burns is doing. I don't really care if people have, like, bad takes on Ukraine in general. That's a really sinister use of Ukraine as a hot button, you know?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, just rewinding a little bit to where I was before we went on this tangent, which is not an unimportant tangent. And I'm gonna concede, by the way, that I didn't talk about this very well for a couple of reasons. I'll make the excuse of, like, I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I'm very prone to heightened emotional responses to things. And I had seen some horrific stuff, and some of the discourse about it was horrifying me. One of the things that I have trouble finding a medium between is the distinction between what we argue and the additional thing that we argue by the way that we argue for it. Does that make sense?
Say that one more time for me.
So the difference between like the things that we say and the things that we say in addition to it by how we say it. And one of the things that has really disturbed me, and it's a contradiction that I've been fighting with, is that within Ukraine, there is tremendous corruption, and not just tremendous corruption. People tend to talk about this in isolation from like the war effort, for example, but it directly impedes it. And within Ukraine, there are people whose lives are being treated by pro-Ukrainians as simply disposable. As in, like, the manner in which their lives are disposed of, even if we presume as a matter of course that their lives are disposable for the sake of Ukraine, it is just blasé. And people who, for example, are disillusioned and want to leave are spoken about as if they are cowards. I have a problem. Let me use the cookie rocket example from like Destiny, right? The issue with Destiny making the justification for the blockade of Gaza on the grounds that, because he believed, on the basis of the person he was talking to, Amar Badir, I think, that Israel had banned all cookies into Gaza. And his immediate response was to go, well, they had to ban cookies into Gaza because Hamas was using those cookies to melt down into sugar to fuel their rockets. And the problem wasn't that he was wrong. The problem was that his immediate impulse was to defend the state instead of making power give an accounting for itself, a justification for itself. And my issue, and one of the reasons why I've been so strident about the conscription issue, is not because I can't imagine a situation under which that actually makes sense even from a humanitarian standpoint. The problem was there seemed to be a reflexive attitude of justifying any and all brutality against Ukrainian people on the grounds that Russia was worse. And I find this horrifying because it basically means that we've given up essential moral territory and are allowing ourselves to be fascist, provided that we have an instigating actor from the outside first. And in the meantime, there are people...
I can get with that. I can get with this idea because I think one of the things that... I think, let's just talk about the pseudo-leftists just generally. The weird take I have that I don't want Israel destroyed, or I don't care if the state of Israel goes away as long as everyone inside of it is emancipated and treated equally under the law. That statement is almost, it's like an inverse of this, where my any semblance of support for this is clearly seen as
it's my position. That's my position on Israel. It's like I don't give a fuck about there being an entity called Israel there. What I care about is that the people who are there are being managed in a way where they aren't reduced either to cannon fodder and or pests for extermination, and that they're able to just do stuff that's productive and live their lives. I don't really give a shit if it's one state or two state. In fact, I think the two-state solution is pretty obviously just a way of kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's the two-state solution is a one-state solution. That's the thing.
Yeah. It's also bullshit, but I agree with you on that. And I have the same take on Ukraine, essentially. Like, my issue there is I'm not in favor of Russia winning the war. My issue is I'm not in favor of the leadership of Ukraine deciding that Ukrainian lives are forfeit, and that's just the end of the conversation. Because that can't be it. Because it's like, we don't stop, for example, being leftists because, I don't know, the US is at war with China or Iran, God forbid. Like, all of a sudden, well, country's at war. Okay, no more social critique. You are going to die for the flag, or you're a coward traitor or something.
Well,
and I find that really disturbing because there's a massive amount of inequality, including gender inequality, by the way, that's at play in terms of how people are mobilized and who's not mobilized. And you pointed out, and I think that's fair, that there are a lot of people who are in a privileged position who are actually sacrificing for that cause. I think I have two responses to that. The first is that I think it's primarily people really at the top who are really the ones benefiting from this and who can't escape from it, not so much the kinds of people you and I would ever in a million years have a chance of meeting. But the second thing is, like, I don't think that's a byway for saying that, oh, well, the freedom and the autonomy of the individual humans in Ukraine is therefore forfeit. They didn't choose to be there. The state of Ukraine as it is emergent within the lifetimes of many of the poor bastards who are being sent to have their asses blown out by drones right now. And I don't think they owe Ukraine their lives. I think Ukraine has to make a pitch to them to justify it first. They need to make a deal,
Well,
so to speak.
let's make the simple version of this for me is
Yeah.
to say, I would argue that I don't think conscription's bad, and in a lot of this, to be frank, but you shouldn't be conscripting people and sending them to front lines. If they don't want to go, they go to jail. I think there's you send them elsewhere. There's a lot of things that need to be done in the military that you can do. Like there's
conscripting people to go to work. Like, listen, there is a difference there, and I think it's an important difference. I'm not really one to find, like, I don't think you'll argue me to a point of agreement where I'm going to be like, you know what, it's okay to force people to work for the state because the state's under attack. But there is a difference between, for instance, and this is where the gendered aspect comes out. So there was a trans woman who the courts actually allowed to be removed from the military on the grounds that this is a woman, and women have the right to leave the military. One of the things that's always really disturbed me is the way in which the masculine presumption of being willing cannon fodder, and if you aren't, then you're a woman, so therefore it's okay to watch you die screaming, and so on and so forth. I find that deeply disturbing. The idea that on the basis of the dangly bit between your legs, like the most sensitive, gentle, and fragile people can be sent to be turned into hamburger, I find horrifying. And that is something that is kind of going on right now. And that's sort of being, and where I get emotional about this is when people are like, well, okay, fine. And that's it. And it's like, well, hang on. So when does it stop being fine? It sort of dovetails with what you're talking about, how this very quickly turns into an endless state of emergency that never closes.
Right. But I think this is where the contingent sort of reality of it on the ground. And I think there's again, I don't think the discussion necessarily is about whether or not conscription is good or bad. It's a question for me of whether or not it can be critiqued. Like that's,
I agree. Well, that's my issue.
If I say conscription good, you say conscription bad, that dialogue that needs to be able to happen there as we discuss what we want to be supporting, how the country works, what our support looks like, how that support functions. All of these things are incredibly important when it comes to the ongoing, like,
I 100% agree and endorse that. Agree with and endorse that take.
Yeah. So it's just,
that is.
I think this is where you were heading. And again, Dylan Burns and how he's handling and the people around him demanding like fealty is really fucking weird.
Well, one-sidedly, not demanding fealty also to Palestine, which I find incredibly disturbing.
It's a sort of thing. It depends on what that fealty is, right?
Well, true, yeah. But also, like, I think like there's another element to this as well, where it's like the stakes with that are fairly low because this is very obviously a matter of like social media networking. This is very obviously a matter of like using this as a byway to attack people sort of associated with the Sonpai group. Very petty stuff that doesn't actually have an impact on the war at all or on people's lives generally. I think for me, what's very disturbing, and again, going back to like the distinction between theory and practice or like talking about it and what talking about it does, I am of the position that when human lives are being expended as a resource, that it's actually really important to give a really strong pushback to that and then to let power then justify itself. And it's not our job to steelman that position. And one of the things that can result in is like, well, it looks like I'm being unfair. But the reason why I'm being unfair, and I think we need to be unfair, is because one of the problems with being fair is that the state doesn't argue with us. It does that by itself. And so if we're arguing for it, we're giving it an additional edge when it is not justifying its reasons to us. It's just picking us off the street and sending us to go die and hoping there's enough dumb people who will instinctively defend it that they can do that regardless. And in addition to this, with Ukraine in particular, this combined with the persecution of leftist politics, it's a really bad combination. I am really worried that political opponents of the current regime are being disposed of through the, for example. I'm really concerned that the war is being used as a justification for demonizing socialist.
You have to hold on for 2 seconds. Sorry.
Oh, please. It's okay. Go on.
No problem, sweetheart. Can I have a huggy?
Did a Dexter invade?
No, my little sweet thing. Hi there. Can you say hi?
Aw.
That's my bye-bye.
Hey, you.
That's
See,
right.
it's not fair. Now I can't yell at you if you yell at me.
Yeah. Sorry, we continue.
No, you're good. I think you get the idea.
I do.
Yeah. So, like, for me, it's like one of the things I find really frustrating and disturbing is that, like, little people for whom there are no stakes are reflexively, like, barring conversation on behalf of a state that will not deign to justify itself. It just simply presumes it. And people are then bullied to just agree with it out of hand. And there's just bluntly no advocacy on behalf of Ukrainians at that point. Or just in general terms, there's no advocacy on behalf of humans. Like, we all basically turn fascist for the state, provided some other state started it, quote unquote. And it did, to be clear. Like, I'm pro-Ukraine. I'm pro-sending money to Ukraine. I'm pro-supporting the Ukrainian war effort. One of the most perverse aspects of the Iran war is that it's Zelensky endorsed intervention in Iran, and then very swiftly learned that actually Israel doesn't really care about Ukraine because it's perfectly fine with Russia benefiting financially from the war to the tune of billions of dollars, which is obviously going to help Russia fight against Ukraine and not going to help Ukraine fight against Russia.
Well, and this is where we get into, I think, the very difficult reality of what it means to be in the position Ukraine's in. And I think the history of the Korean War and what happened in Korea is incredibly informative here. And again, not just Korea. There's a lot of countries you can pick from. I just happen to be picking the one that Zelensky's talked about. The people around him.
I didn't know he talked about that. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, but again, is he bad for doing it? No. I just think when they're drawing these conclusions and they're drawing these parallels, I think it is absolutely worthwhile to hearing them and using that when you talk about it, right? Like, when they're saying this, they're clearly invested in a very particular position or see themselves in that. And so teasing that out and going, hey, this is the way vassal states and states that are being built in very particular ways against large scale powers, especially in Asia, are sort of put into place, and how they're propped up and how they sort of fly. Is there a way where we can stop doing the things we're doing? No, I don't think so. I think we'd be dooming a huge number of women to rape, kids to death. Russia really, really likes genocide, like as a country, really likes genociding the territories it takes over and to try to return them to like this glory silliness of yesteryear. There's a lot of Georgia would, not the state Georgia, which is lovely and has peaches. The country Georgia would really love to be sort of known as, hey, by the way, we may have had a genocide. Yeah. How about the Chechens?
The analogy. Well, like, the analogy I fall on here is like, and I'm not 100% on this, but it's something that haunts me a little bit. It's like, would you endorse Hamas, for example, grabbing Palestinian kids in Gaza off the street and forcing them to go fight on the front lines against Israel? You have very much at a heightened speed, the exact same type of existential invasion taking place there. I would not endorse that. I don't think you would endorse that either. I think that's kind of an obvious one. It gets more complicated with Ukraine, bluntly, because there is this presumption that Ukrainians have signed up for it in a more legitimate way, which is something that I push back on a little bit. What I mean by this is like, people refer to the
I'd be very curious to see how that language works, because I don't know anyone who's using language where it's like, this is what they signed up for.
Well, I will point to it. People will absolutely refer to conscription being in the Constitution. of Ukraine.
Right. But the conscription will be in the Constitution, but the conscription is not like because it's Tuesday. It's in the Constitution against an invading power.
True. Absolutely.
And there is absolutely an invading power.
Absolutely. I agree. But why is the Constitution even a factor?
Because of general democratic principles, as far as I understand it.
There is a presumption that by dint of being within Ukraine, you have signed on in a social contract kind of a sense to the terms of the state. We both know this is not the case anywhere. At least that exists. At least you can point to that. It changes the reasoning process a little bit for the people who endorse that line of argumentation. But like strictly speaking, Ukrainians did not all sit down at a table together and decide on those terms. For the vast majority of Ukrainians, this is just a thing that happened. Even if they voted for the people who did it, this is just a thing that happened, right? So when you're talking about like the Constitution, you are fundamentally talking about a justifying document that ratifies a relationship fundamentally of domination of the resources of a given territory.
Sure, but okay. There's more complex things that states do and how they are involved in people's daily lives, especially when you're talking about something that is, Ukraine hasn't been its own country for the last 100 years. It's gone in and out of various things. They've tried to rebuild. Yes. They've had to deal with being not part of Russia, part of it, joining up different areas, trying to figure out what the fuck that means. Cities have roads, they have taxes, they have they have infrastructure, they have schools. They have tax breaks for companies. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that the way the state operates is about sort of everyone semi-taking part in some way. People going, well, I'm no longer, I can take all the benefits, but I'm not, doing the rest of it.
There we run into,
putting us in a place where, to me, this is very similar to the libertarian response towards statehood.
It's a liberal response, actually. It's not a libertarian one. I'll explain very quickly. One of the problems we have here is that the globe has become subtly fascistic in ways that people no longer detect, and anti-liberal in ways that people no longer detect. People think about authoritarianism in terms of kicking people out of their countries and protecting the borders and so on and so forth, and that's true. But people also forget the positive elements of the liberal justification for state sovereignty, namely the idea that the legitimacy of a state is derived from the fact that the people in some critical sense consent to its rule. This is the basis of all liberal justifications for the past 400 years.
Sure.
And
I don't think this has anything to do with why people do what they do under any of these systems, though.
It doesn't, but it does have to do with when, for example, a state can order people to their deaths. And this is why.
Vietnam, we did that in America for fun.
Yeah, but the question is, was this at odds with the logic of its own sovereignty? And I think it was. And in this
I'd argue Vietnam's in our own sovereignty too, and here in the States.
I would agree with you. That's my point. But if, for example, you are not allowed to leave, this is where it becomes kind of critical. If you're not allowed to leave, the state cannot refer to your acceptance of the benefits of being a domicile of the state as a tacit consent to its rule. If you're not allowed to leave, there is no capacity for consent. You are effectively in a very cushy prison.
This feels like a very theory-based thing when the way that a person exists in society, if I decide I'm going to be leaving, I'm trying to run and escape the draft, that thing is not just simply, well, obviously, since I cannot leave, therefore, that's not really how it works. There's a terror or an investment in Russia. I don't want to be fighting Russia because I believe in that. Or
I'm not talking about the logic of the people who leave. I'm talking about the logic that would justify the state having a moral right to send those people to their deaths. Right? Having a normative right to do so. The basis of that is the consent of the governed. This is universal for liberal society. I
guess for me, I just think it's incredibly impractical to utilize conscription to send people unwilling to the front lines. I don't believe you should. I think it's bad.
I mean, I agree with that too. I agree with that too.
It's bad armying.
I agree. That's not the one that like affronts me though. That's like a bad move in chess, right?
So what is the one that affronts you?
The one that affronts me is the idea that human beings' autonomy becomes forfeit because a larger entity that doesn't actually connect to them intrinsically decides that it should be so.
I got taken off of pre-check here in the States, which
sure
is a flying thing. You can sign up, you go through a process like $100.
Yeah.
It lets you get onto planes faster. And so
Yeah.
if you travel a lot, it's great. I got taken off of it a week after I started protesting at ICE.
Interesting.
And it was weird. And then it turns out they're doing that a lot. Is this wrong? Sure, of course. I'd rather, but also, at what point is the state? We're all at the whim of the state. We're all at the whim of power. This is the way we functionally have invested ourselves.
Well, we didn't. I didn't invest myself that way. How did you invest yourself that way? You something else invested you. You didn't invest anything. This happened to you. This wasn't a thing you chose.
Nothing's the thing I choose. Nothing's the thing I choose.
I agree. But it also will not.
But I'm not a choosing thing.
Right?
No one's a choosing thing. Like now we're getting to the theory weird thing. But like
I'm down with that.
The states exist as, and again, how they work, how the logic of it operates, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't see. I guess I just don't emotionally see this the same way. It doesn't fulfill me the same way as you're talking about.
Well, let me put it this way. If somebody runs from Ukrainian conscription and escapes to Poland, say, like if you hear about that, able-bodied man finds out that they're conscripting able-bodied men. They're not, by the way, conscripting often very unable-bodied men, but they're conscripting able-bodied men to go fight, right?
Yeah, and you hear some guy and they go, he's a coward. What a fucking coward piece of shit.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that. What's your read on somebody who runs?
I don't care.
I don't care either. I agree.
The reason that, why do you think they call him a coward? It's because they believe he's a coward?
No, I think they call him a coward because they have this notion that it is a masculine duty to be willing to stoically become hamburger for the glory of the country.
Oh, see, I think it's far more complicated than that. I think people call them coward in order to not be called coward themselves and not be seen in an outgroup. I think people will be invested in various large-scale things such as national identity or whatever it is.
I'm glad we agree. I didn't have to say all of that. Thank you.
Yeah. But
I was taking the coward's way out there. I didn't want to have to try to
calling someone coward is no different than someone running.
I agree.
So then what's the condemnation?
Well, the condemnation is on this end when people I talk to are no longer willing to interrogate this at all. One of the things that really bothered me is not the fact that they called them cowards, the fact that calling them cowards was in lieu of actually seriously considering the nature of the privation of rights that was taking place. Right? Like the nature of like, oh, there's a transformation taking place here. Under these conditions, we are no longer advocates of the exploited against those who exploit. We have collapsed those two together, and now we are fine with, the exploited being turned into a disposable resource for the sake of the system as a whole. One of the reasons why I equate it to slavery is not because I think the institution is identical. There's obvious differences. One of the reasons why I equate them is because as economic exploitation becomes a condition of state power, you can very easily imagine a situation in which the enslavement of people can be rationalized as the condition of a state maintaining its sovereignty. And I think we all agree that would not therefore be justified.
But so this is
like weird special cases that go on.
If there is a place that I would say where we might diverge or where I see worthwhile critique or commentary on what you're saying, the saying that conscription always bad, this always bad, blah blah. I don't think like those are polemic.
I think conscription always violent. I would never say always bad.
It's slavery. It's identical to slavery. Like we can make commentary on this. We could talk about how it logically applies and how we've got this sort of reasoning faculties. The underlying thing that is problematic for me when I'm seeing all of this, and that is sort of worth pushing back against, is that we as people, you and I, let's just talk about us. We're streamers, commentators, Dylan Burns, same thing. The purity testing that we're seeing in the problematic side there is that what we need to be doing is having a different conversation politically about how we support Ukraine and Ukraine's people. That's what I think is the most important thing.
I agree.
So by eliminating that and making it so it clearly only fits into the generalized war machine, which is the setup at play here, that basically silences our ability to have any emancipatory politics taking place. Because my money is, we're not terribly far from Russia kind of having a really weird bad day, in the same way I think we're not far from Israel having a really kind of collapsy weird day, and what these countries mean and are fundamentally being able to change. And Ukraine, I think, with that, and Palestine with that, and Lebanon with that, and Iran with that. And as these collapses happen, America, I think we're not far from this. The reimagining of what these things can be and how they work, that work needs to be done ahead of time. We need to be
I 100%
how do we
agree.
think
So
about
I'm
it?
gonna,
How do we talk about these things?
I 100% agree. This is why I go back to, like, for me, there is a challenge where I am always saying two things at once. I'm not just saying the literal words that I am saying. I'm also saying something else by the manner in which I choose to express it. The manner in which you choose to express something, for example, just as a hypothetical, criticizing someone who is a pedophile and condemning someone who is a pedophile. This is a person I am not going to speak to because he is disgusting and should be in a box, versus I disagree firmly with this man's opinion, as everybody who talks to Destiny nowadays is effectively doing. Those are two different statements. Even though the opposition politically and the motivation for the conversation may be identical in both cases. He said something abhorrent about, some guy who was shot by a mass shooter at a rally, say, for example. For me, I expect pushback of a certain quality and kind based on the stakes at play. So I will take a very strident stance on stuff like this, because I think you need to take a strident stance on stuff like this so that the pushback ends up within the domain of somewhere we can kind of tolerate. And one of the things that I'm really bothered by is how the defense of, for example, like the rights of Ukrainian citizens who are not allowed to leave, but also not really supported by the state financially, but also forced to go die horribly for it when the leadership is just not putting its money where its mouth is. As you pointed out, there are exceptions that exist. I don't know if I would qualify that as, I count that as the leadership per se, but like there are people who benefit from Ukraine who still also put like family and life on the line and so on and so forth, and I understand and respect that. But I think that it's the responsibility of people pushing back on that to provide those arguments, and not for me to pad it out and be as like there's a catch-22 where sometimes the presentation of nuance provides soft passage for just some really bad things, and I don't know what the solution to that is.
I'm not going to disagree with you, because I think we've had this conversation a lot. Because one of the challenges we run into, and it's, I think, I even think I said a little bit at the beginning where I'm like, and I know you're here, so now I'm saying it to your face, as something can be a little prickly, comes out of the drama world. There's a different polemic mentality. Like there's a different mentality for me when it comes to talking about this, because I just come from a different place on it. But I don't think, is mine more useful than yours? I'm like this, let's just say, like, if we're going to do the utilitarian thing, I have different takes on value, but if it's just utilitarian, it's a worthwhile conversation. What is the thing we need to be doing? How do you,
I mean, to be blunt with you,
how do you get voices? Yes. How do you get people to see it? Well, specifically, and we can talk about why Dylan Burns and his ilk have done very well, because the status quo that's non-polemic of, we've got to support Ukraine, harsh words, feels emotionally investable. I can go, yeah, that's a good take, good guy. He cares about invasion. He cares about a strength I have.
Yeah.
And so people like that simple statement. They're invested in it. They're able to run with it. Anything short of that becomes oh, well, there you go. Oh, this is the same as slavery. This is the same as this. And it's tough.
Yeah, I'm pessimistic of the ability to talk to that at all. I'm trying to stir some kind of like lively engagement with this from my audience that isn't just just moralizing against having the conversation to begin with. I don't think we have at this juncture the social connections or the social networking or just the general like solidarity to even push back on that to begin with. I think this is something I was talking about earlier on my stream. And by the way, I didn't mean to stream over you. My apologies.
No, it's fine. I was joking when I said you're an asshole.
I know.
Because it's funny. It's funny. It was like Sunday stream, that fucking asshole of all the 2 weeks I don't fucking stream.
I almost made a similar comment. It's like, boy, I wish he told me he was fucking streaming. I would have rescheduled. I was tired today. But like the general, like, one of the things I was talking about is that I think, especially on social media, we're kind of addicted to the idea that, oh, we need to find the right thing to say or the right thing to do or the right person to vote for. And like, that's important, but it's also like, that presumes we've taken other steps beforehand that make those things efficacious. And I think one of the reasons why leftists are generally sliding down into a new alt-right pipeline of its own is that nobody wants to actually go outside and talk to another human being. And so there are no actual connections being built. So when one person in society is oppressed, there's nobody else in society detects that. And that being the case, it's like every single leftist venture of any sort is the most easily co-opted thing in existence, because everyone's already bought and sold by this delusion that, well, we all just need to like have the most pragmatic character sheet right now. And it's like, yeah, there are important elections right now that we need to win. Yeah, you're in a two-party system where you're kind of fucked if the other party wins. But also, at the same time, if that's the only game you can play, you are never going to be out of that situation. There is no escape, period. And so, like, for me, like, I'm increasingly of the opinion that, like, building on the back end, sort of a collective capacity to, like, have intense conversations about this that actually kind of like challenge these.
One of the things we run into that is, I'm going to try to talk about this in a little bit bigger, because this is not just a touch grass thing. I have never been able to find a place in significant company that is politically active where exploration of ideas is actually rewarded. That's all like, that's the easiest way I'll put it. And that includes in person, that's online, because there is a statement of like, oh, well, you think that, therefore you think that, and inference runs into inference, becomes a thing. It's not really cancel culture. I'm not like making these weird woke comments. It's more the immediate response is so negative that the pushback.
Well, it's actual cancel culture, bluntly. Like, it's not,
it becomes hesitancy.
It's like,
hesitancy in any argumentation becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
And that type of thing, when you're talking about how ideas can function, I was in Discord 2 months ago and having a conversation about my understanding of a particular very nuanced thing in the words autism, schizophrenia, and anti-Oedipus. And it became genuinely 2 weeks.
You see, Felix, you got to him, Felix.
Yeah. It's 50. We don't mention the name. 50 to 60 people actively writing me, doing video, like, and this type of thing, it's like, there was no care taken in response. There was no, hey, let me help and explain. It was negative. And it wasn't negative in the sense of like, oh, Brooks wants to kill autistic people. It's not what I was saying. It was none of these things. It was a very nuanced, weird theory.
Well, I mean, maybe after occasional conversations with me, but.
You are, it's not the tism.
Hey, listen, I'm actually not autistic. My mom had me tested.
It's not the tism for you. Other things make that happen. But that thing of, and this is, by the way, this is people. It's a very American Western thing. The way that we focus, the way that we, when someone speaks, we necessarily need them to be stating and utilizing words that are part of the Code of Everyday Signs. The Code of Everyday Signs, as it's spoken, I take to mean as I understand it, which means I personalize it, which means it's about what I believe or how I'm talking about it. And as such, you've got to agree. Oh man, that's like the best movie I've ever seen. That was okay. You think I'm bad, like that, even that simple version of it, where it's like, we don't agree on a movie. That type of thing is a way that discourse functions today in a really horrifying way.
To be fair, you get really upset about disagreements over.
I don't get upset. I think it's fun to have disagreements. I like disagreements. I dive into them.
I 100% believe that you believe that whole.
I do.
But no, I'm
Marxism
agreeing.
comes up
I'm agreeing
differently.
with I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
And I think when it comes to political concepts, and I think at the center of it, and I've watched your video. I didn't watch everything you post, but at the center of it, and again, it's because I know you. I am certain your concern is primarily with the people of Ukraine. It is
primarily with the people of Ukraine. Also, primarily, like, to be honest with you, and this is one of the reasons why the Dylan Byrne things disturbs me so much. The America is even as it's defunded Ukraine through Trump, even as it's like walked back that, it is also still supporting Ukraine.
Yes.
American resources are absolutely still active in Ukraine. Some in ways that are not actually helpful, but are just kind of perverse. Palantir is massive in Ukraine. It's really weird, actually. But like, it also, it's like, it's one of those things where it's like what political side is this issue even on at that point?
It's always on the same political side.
Yeah, I know.
Always.
It's on the side of capital. Exactly. But here's the thing.
Because it always has to be. All of our meaning is determined through the very same mechanism.
I agree. At this dumb level, though, where we pretend that states are real, okay? And we pretend that all this shit is real. America is funding Ukraine. America is funding the genocide of Palestinians.
Yes.
And these have a radically different needfulness morally for American voters. And so one of the things that's really disturbing to me is that a whole lot of people who are like, have all of these really good arguments in support of Ukraine that I agree with. Yeah, they were attacked. Yeah, they have the right to self-determination and so on and so forth. Yeah, Russia's arguments about them being like culturally Russian is bullshit, and it wouldn't matter even if they were. Leave all that aside. That is now being deployed to shame people who are taking, frankly, like a much more reasonable and much more justified like stance just on its face against their country being actively complicit in murdering children. Not failing to take the side of the victim in a conflict, actively being on the side of Russia in the analogy with Ukraine. And I don't have words for how disgusting I find. And so it's like, one of the things that I'm really frustrated by is that we are perfectly capable collectively of having debates in which someone in my position, for example, is expected to remain calm in defense of the notion that, hey, maybe we should kill less kids possibly. On the flip side, if I go, hey, I don't like the idea of people being scooped up by vans and being sent unwilling to be horrible soldiers just to die in misery for a state that does not give a fuck about them. That is now like a great moral faux pas, and I find that juxtaposition
I don't disagree
really
with.
disturbing.
I don't disagree.
I know you don't.
The thing that I would just say as a note, whenever we say it, whenever people say, well, the state, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as race. There's no such thing as gender. All of these things. When I say it, and this includes me, I'm saying it in a very theory-based thing. There is absolutely an emotional reaction people have to their state, to their position, to their race, to their gender, to who they are, to where they're at, and that emotional thing that they have is investments inside of that larger thing.
I'll push back a little bit there. I'm gonna stop you right there. True, unless they don't. And one of the things that really bothers me is that even if it's a marginal case, those people who don't, those people who have sort of thought their way to a place where they don't have those connections, those people are effectively being forced against their will by something that is alien to go pretend to be its property and to go die for it. And I find that really disturbing. And that's where it becomes akin to slavery for me. Because it's like, at a certain point, there is a difference between being embedded in a community and being reluctantly deployed in its defense, and being alienated from a community and being reluctantly deployed in its defense. You know what I'm saying? Like there one of these people has some minimal remnant of ownership over their actions. The other one has been completely depersoned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think.
Go on.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I know you don't. Bluntly, I know you don't.
Yeah. But it's again,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, and I know people in our chats.
I don't
tend to
disagree
be-
with what you were saying. I
think people in our chats tend to be lefty.
Yeah.
They tend to be thinking through this, and they're aware that nationalism is bullshit. Blah blah blah.
See, I disagree with that. I think that
people
should
say
be,
this often.
I don't think that's true, though.
I think it's well, people say it, and even if they don't, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
More my point. Find yourself in a position where nationalism is emotionally immediate, apparent, and investable, and then tell me again if you find yourself completely neutral to it and not caring. Very rarely is that the case.
I agree, but here's the catch. You and I, in Canada and in America, are not over there. And so one of the things that's happening is that we are having this discussion, presuming their voice. And I think we shouldn't do that.
I'm not really presuming a voice. I think more.
No. You and I aren't. But when people do have this conversation, people fleeing Ukraine are cowards, as in they have a moral imperative written on their hearts. They know they need to stand.
So who said that, by the way? Who said that people fleeing are cowards specifically?
Lucy.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I was mad at her bluntly. I'm not opposed to people who have a pro-conscription stance. I understand it. It's when you just reflexively dehumanize other human beings, especially to be. Do I want to be an asshole? You know what? Fuck it. Especially if you're not holding a gun yourself. You know, this is my position. Merrick DeVille. You know Merrick, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably she's like in the Vosh circle. She used to date.
I'm aware of a person named Merrick once or twice.
Okay, Merrick is joining the Ukrainian military. Leave like a nurse or something like that.
Why?
If I had this argument with Merrick, I don't know, and I kind of wish she wouldn't. But like, if to be blunt with you, but like if I had this argument with Merrick, I would never lose my temper, even if she had the harshest stance on conscription. Why? Because she's doing it. In my opinion, just to be honest with you, if you are going to take the stance of calling people who do not fight unwillingly for a state cowards, you can do that, but you'd better be. I would
give Lucy room. It's not direct military conscription. Being who Lucy is as a person and traversing the countryside that Lucy traverses and doing the work she does, I'd argue, I give more room.
Women can fight in Ukraine. Even trans women can. They just don't have to. They're allowed to leave.
Right. I don't care about that though. Like actually the existence, there's a putting money where the mouth is as far as I'm concerned with Lucy for the most part. It's not like this, it's not, I don't have a rating thing when it comes to like how much people hurt or whatever. It's like
to an extent, but I think there is a difference between willingly going somewhere in a non-combative capacity and endorsing those people being forced to do so and then calling them cowards if they flee it. I just don't like that. That's a great way to get me really mad. Okay. Because I'm to be clear, like I'm not one of these people. There are people on the left who frustrate me, who try to, for example, treat quote unquote virtues like courage as essentially meaningless. And there are people who try to refer to any kind of human action involving danger and expense as essentially cynical or perverse in some respect. And I find that really frustrating because it's giving first of all, on a cynical standpoint, it's giving all of the power away to the right, which is now able to mobilize human potential in its favor while we're all, running for our own self-interest. I don't think that's good. But there's a flip side to this, which is that we also have our own set of values that sort of stands apart from those. And it frustrates me when there seems to be sort of an infectious, very much not leftist rooted compunction to do away with those as soon as a state that has been framed in a particular way is involved. And the reason why I say a state that has been framed in a particular way is not because I'm casting doubt on the worthiness of supporting Ukraine. It's that there are a bunch of other places that are in the same situation where we are actively on the other side. And that includes Canada, by the way, which is consistently taken a pro-Israel stance. So it's like,
but again, this is And then, I just got a super chat because they want to make sure that I, use some silly Canadian money at some point.
Har har.
Lucy's comment, I didn't hear it, so I'm kind of going off of vibes at this point for the most part.
Well, I didn't record it either, so you'll have to take my word.
That's fine, but
you can nod if you want.
I don't think you're lying. It's again, there's color into everything that I tend to be thinking about. I would argue. Again,
by the way, just
I've been in fights. I've been stuck in a bar situation. I've been in places where I turn to people who are capable of a thing and they don't do anything to help. I've had very choice words for those people. And I think when you have moments where you are emotional, I would absolutely say Lucy is not just through the work she's done for kids and other shit, but just being where she is, how she's done stuff traveling. She is emotionally invested in a way that I'm probably not super familiar with. And so I'm not going to judge the way that she's invested as being good or bad or immoral or unethical. I think people have reactions as they do to lots of different things.
I think the difference is it's free. I think that's the key difference is it's free.
What's free?
She retains her autonomy and she goes home and she plays video games. The people who are picked up in bands don't get to do to be clear, my point is not to diminish what Lucy does. My point is that this isn't an argument, that contempt for those people, and I find that contempt disturbing. Just very quickly, if I may respond to chat, I have invited Lucy to talk to me on stream if she wants. I'm happy to talk to her. She can.
I'll end up. Lucy wants to chat with me. I'll end up chatting with her at some point.
There you go. Yeah. But here's the thing, though, and this is where, unfortunately, like the nuances of what's going on in Ukraine and its history come into play. If you're in a bar and you're getting beaten up and somebody's watching you and they're not doing anything, you'll justifiably have choice words for that person.
Right. But if the person's in the bar and taking part in some way to, get people out of there during a fight versus someone who's not in the bar at all. Well, here's where it gets kind of weird. I'm just saying, like, one of us, you, me, and Lucy, I ain't in fucking Ukraine. I haven't gotten in a plane to go fly. I could go fly there,
but I don't think you need to, though. I don't think you're obligated to Ukraine. I do think, though, there is a sort of an intrinsic viciousness. Forgive me. For advocating for putting other people's bodies in the line of fire unwillingly while we remain safe. I feel like that's something we are not in a place to do. I feel like there's something wrong about that. And I would apply that to myself as well. But there's a flip side to this. And actually, I think this kind of speaks to some of the stuff you were talking about earlier. We tend to talk about this in a certain direction where the front line is sort of this weird peripheral thing that's just sort of an emanation from the center. It's a little bit more complicated than that because it's not just a matter of what the state is doing. It's also a matter of what the military actually is as it fights Russia. And one of the weird things that's going on right now is that new recruits, because they are not willing and they're not very good, is they are being picked up by existing regiments. I'm probably using the wrong terms. Many of which are like white nationalist in nature, and they are being used for operations that would otherwise kill a bunch of people that they actually care about. And so there's a really disturbing element of regime change internal to Ukraine that's taking place right now, where the right wing is also using the war to empower itself, and they've become incredibly strong as a result.
Well, this
is not even in connection with.
There's a comment in chat I actually think is to me representative of the point. And DK Art and Design, who's been around, DK's cool. Like, again, this is not me. This is not commentary on being shitty or anything at all. But the comment, you should save scrutiny for the Russian invader, in my opinion. That's the fucking line for me, where it's like, if it was the first month, maybe first 6 months, at some point when it's becoming the forever war and it's changing what it is. I think how a state reacts and how a state does things and how people do things in general. Hey, if someone attacks me and my kids and I beat them, I grab a shovel and I hit them in the face and kill them. And it's not like it's just reactive. Yeah, it's fucking, that sucks. And go out. The guy shouldn't have attacked my family. If that happens and I like push him down and we get away and then I go to his house later, there's a reason that like time matters and the way these things functioning matters. And the way that the state functions in time is incredibly important.
Well, I think sort of to that point, but also a little bit sort of bypassing it somewhat. It's the deployments of the different powers of the Ukrainian state in ways that are actually that sort of loop to loop through international affairs back into supporting Russia. Like it becomes a very weird situation. Like the blockading of the Strait of Hormuz, which is the result of a campaign that Zelensky all effectively endorsed, is like, okay. Like, and we end up in a place where it's like there's a fundamental irrationality to the entire system, sort of breaks down any sort of really like compelling normative statements for human beings. Israel armed Ukraine. Cool, I guess. Ukraine supported Israel in its attack on Iran. The attack on Iran resulted in a situation where Russia was able to benefit financially massively, like to an unfathomable degree, which will help it fight its war against Ukraine, which it has the manpower and the contempt for its own for its own humans to wait out. And there's also a change too, where it's like there is a difference between conscripting for the sake of a war with hope and conscripting for the sake of a war where there is hope that the war can go on forever so long as a Democrat gets into office. These are different cells, you know, and they have different moral weights. And I'm not entirely sure how to parse that out. But like, one of supporting Russia blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Oh, people don't know this. Can I explain very quickly? So as a result of blockading the Strait of Hormuz, oil shipments stopped, right? Here's the problem. Trump doesn't want to deal with the consequences of that economically, so he allowed Russia to sell oil. So Russia has made billions of dollars off of the blockading of the Strait of Hormuz. There you go. That's how fucked this is.
But again,
yeah,
I wouldn't say Russia wants this. They're benefiting.
No.
And there are structures around all these things.
Yes, I agree. But like that's the thing, though, is like when you actually look at, and once again, coming back to, strictly speaking, like when we're talking about states, we're not really talking about closed entities that really exist as such. These are shorthands for major things that have personhood on the international stage. But the stuff that's actually moving is not restricted to those and isn't identifiable with those. The capital flows and all that stuff transcends it and is actually largely indifferent to it, which is why the benefits can accrue to the enemies in the war that every single state says they're on this side of, and they're kind of fine with that.
Well, and this is like what it means, what a forever war means. And there is, again, a huge number of ways we can talk about it and ways to discuss it, because I think Vietnam, for a long time, despite having like a winning moment, dude, I don't know if you saw it, Trump was talking about Iran and saying, Vietnam was like 17 years. Why are you so mad about
saw
a few
that.
weeks? I was like, dude, not the
I was like,
comparison.
thank God he's saying that before the election. Like, great. I was really happy when he said that, to be honest with you.
It was, well, yeah, but it was
he
like,
said what we all knew, but yeah.
But it's just weird when you start talking about like the Philippines is the one I talked about also, where like until 92, we had bases all over the fucking place. And when I say we, I mean Americans. But then like we supposedly got rid of them, but we totally fucking didn't in any way. There's a great book called How to Hide an Empire about what we did in the Philippines. Really insidious. There are hot wars, cold wars, middle wars, non-wars, all these different things. And Saudi Arabia, I would consider to be a defensive vassal state in its own way as well. The setup around all of these things and how forever wars can function and how they work, these are the things worth being aware of. And at the same time, understanding that it's not really a moral failing or an ethical failing. This is the structure of post-World War II hegemonic forces of American and Western power as they sort of find themselves reinforcing themselves elsewhere. And it's really complicated.
Yeah.
But at the base, I don't have the same fault for a lot of people when it comes to nationalism. I think nationalism's terrible.
Oh, I'm not faulting people for nationalism. I think I consider nationalism to be kind of political psychosis. The issue I have is, especially when non-nationals are disallowing conversations, insofar as there is this idea that years after the beginning of the critique of the decisions of one party to the war, even if they're not the aggressor, amounts to a betrayal of its people. Because and this is one of the reasons why I use the vehicle of like this investigative reporting into one of the problems of corruption in Ukraine, is because this corruption isn't just like, it shouldn't be taken as like, this is a justification to abandon Ukraine. It's like, no, there are powerful engines within Ukraine that have abandoned Ukraine, and those need to be dealt with because this perverts the entire thing. Yeah.
How forever wars
literally
operate
perverts the entire thing. Yeah.
Also changes because a lot of people misunderstand and think it's because how we handle Israel is basically we prop Israel up, like fully. That's the way it works.
Fully.
Israel also does its own defense work and things like that, mostly in the tech sector and things that get repatriated back to America. But South Korea, Taiwan are far more interesting in comparisons there because they became co-producers of their own military equipment and then ours. And being built into that system and setup is fundamentally, again...
Well, America just started accepting Ukrainian drone technology.
We don't consider Taiwan to be a forever war. It fucking is. Like, straight up, that's forever war. I think Japan...
you know what? I think it serves the same function. I don't know if I would count it as a forever war as such. I don't think it's a state of war per se in the same way that South Korea and North Korea are. But I agree its function is essentially a constant potential for hostility.
I think there's a de facto client state happening there, but I think we could argue.
I think there's a de facto client state happening there. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a state of war per se. I think South Korea and North Korea is...
how we define war. Is South and North Korea active war? Absolutely. Yes. In what way? Like there's occasional shootings. People escape across. There's missiles going over things, but they're not.
I think the constant missile testing and saber rattling is a key factor. I think China's been a little bit more.
Well, and this is like Lisa makes a comment. Japan and Korea need our bases there. I mean, sure.
True.
Do they? And how does that work? How is defensive working? And also, by the way, they need our bases there. Sure. Does that also mean that we need to be choosing the particular families that are actually going to be making money out of this and gaining leadership?
Well, also, and there's a flip side of this too. It's like they absolutely need our bases there because they have bases there. And I say our because Canada has no, dignity. So I'm just leeching off of yours. But
I mean, the way that Park did is like Korea specifically. The way Park's land change happened. I mean, this is to me one of the things that fundamentally shifts and shows that there's a difference in how these odd nation state sort of situations don't necessarily have to become what one works like another. The way that Park went about its land reform in Korea was it's really fascinating. Korea is really fascinating. The family and the family setup, the word for it is not coming to me. I'm tired right now. Sorry.
That's okay.
It starts with a G. They have a name for the system of like the handful of the hyper oligarchic family structure that is Korea, like crazy. God damn it. 1 second. I need to find this fucking word.
Oh, shit. I think did they mention that in Kingdom?
I don't know what that is.
It's a really good zombie movie set in medieval or Renaissance Korea.
Chaebol. Thank you. Chaebol.
Never mind. Not that.
Wasn't with a G. I was wrong. The Chaebol system. Where like the Samsung family, the Hyundai family, like they run that fucking country in crazy ways. When I was at Starbreeze, we did deals that we were working with the family behind Smilegate, and it felt like a fucking feudal state. It was fucking weird. Korea is a very interesting kind of amazing, really fucking weird, kind of oppressive, super brutal dystopia, in its own way. But the way that these things come about, there's particular structures we're aware of, that we need to be careful doing. And we're starting to see, and I think this is why, for me, the argument, and I mentioned the what's his name's book? What the fuck was his book?
Vladimir something.
Not Volodymyr. I know I mispronounced it earlier. Someone was yelling at me, sending me texts. Doesn't matter. His book and his setup, how it goes about it, is very much kind of a polemic against Western ideas and the idea of how the West is even thinking about this. I found it to be very enlighteningly depressive, I guess. Not Joseph Heller. Jesus Christ.
I was thinking of that.
Pippa. God damn it.
Oh, that was
Pippa's just fucking with me at this point.
That asshole. You don't have the right to bring up Joseph Heller after the position you've taken in this conversation, Pippa. Fuck you. What a dick.
Pippa's a wonderful dick. Pippa's angry at me quite often.
Pippa's angry. There's somebody called Peter Poopy Pants in Ico's chat, and I think we should make them find each other.
I don't. That doesn't sound like a thing I want to have. If I have, and I feel like I just, because it's performative and we're at the place, and I think when you're wrestling with these ideas and with these things, a lot of the ideas you're coming up with and the way I took them, I think mostly I tried to give voice in a lot of different ways to some stuff. There was a lot of frustration, I think, around the polemic side of things that I think people took in weird ways from you. I do think you didn't dissuade certain prickliness. But I don't think it was as strong as some people give credit for. And I think that's just the only thing I'd say if I've got a criticism, not a critique, talking about frameworks and everything. If there is a criticism, it'd be like,
I mean, I would agree with that. I was kind of jarred
I do this
by
too.
The fact.
It's tough not to, because you're talking about someone like Dylan Burns, who is I just did this video, this fucking asshole anarch, fucking everyone is like trying to be nice. They're letting me know, hey, he's an anarchist. He's generally pretty good. His nature video was bad. And then we just get to the point where he just lies about fucking stoicism, and then he just throws everyone to a fucking masculinist right-wing piece of shit. And it was one of the most embarrassing ways to end a video. I had very choice words for that, as I often do, because I find it to be just disgusting. I get the idea of being impassioned and angry. I totally do. I really, really do.
It wasn't the fact that it was involving Dylan Burns. It wasn't that. I think what really, in terms of my emotionality, what triggered my response to this, I saw a really disturbing piece of footage of a victim of a drone strike. And as you know, I've been a caretaker for someone the last little while, and it's been really, really hard on me, bluntly. And I keep thinking when I look at this, and it's changed my perspective on things as well. It's changed what I prioritize and the kinds of things I'm super sensitive to. And I keep thinking, for every single one of those people, and it was a horrible video. It's one of those ones where you are literally able, some of them are sort of fuzzy and unclear. This is one of those ones where you can see their organs still working through the medicine ball-sized hole in the thigh, right? I think of all of the people that are connected to that person, all of the people who may be dependent on that person. Or I think about maybe all of the people who had the same level of concern for that person as I do for my partner. And then I imagine some asshole calling them a coward. Because there's a flip side to all this, which is the people who are being forced to the front against their will, or who are caught running and they're then forced to the front. Those are the people fighting the war.
And again,
and
this is
I
where
get incensed really hard from that.
I get it. And this is, again, I don't know Lucy crazy well. At some point, I'm going to be talking.
I'm not
to
even
Lucy
just talking
this.
about Lucy. That was
right,
just, that
but
was just the discrete
people in
case,
general.
yeah.
I think the vast majority of people are actually not hyper principled when it comes to who is a coward. They're more speaking generally and as having a conversation around what it means to desert. When you have a conversation and talk about the specific person and the actual lived experience that is driving it, and you're much more attuned to that because that's who you're thinking of. You're putting someone in a position that's who they're thinking of. You tend to find a lot fewer people that are going to be very specific once they know the lived experience of a person, of calling them a coward, of saying these things, because, there's people who will always do it. There's people,
I agree.
sure.
I agree.
I don't see that as being Lucy.
Yes.
I don't see that as being even Dylan Burns. I think these people are emotionally caught up. I think Dylan Burns is enjoying his particular grift that he's had for some time, but not Lucy or a few others. And I think I've got a few other people I know who absolutely would say deserters are cowards. I have some right-wing friends who've said that about and I know their position. I know how they look at it. And again, I think their generalities, the way they're utilizing, again, these grand signs of investment in all of these things. But for me, you show them drone footage, almost all of them will go, why is that? For me, my first reaction, I send it to other people. They go, it's not that drone footage you're talking about, but they go,
here's my problem though.
What's that kid doing? That kid how old is that kid? Well, a
lot of them actually tend to, but like, here's the problem I have. And this is where I start to lose my cherub-like demeanor a little. The resistance I have to what I think is a pretty bog standard point, like, hey, don't just like naively give a blank check to a state to use its people as a standing reserve of disposable material. Criticize that. Make it justify that expense. I think it's a pretty, really, frankly, milquetoast position. I feel like that meeting the level of vitriolic resistance that it was, I found that incredibly disturbing. Because it's like we're in a place now where it's like we are geographically distinct from fascism, not actually principally. And I don't know. I have a lot of problems with that. And I don't have a pathway internally myself. And this is a weakness for me. I don't have an internalized pathway to managing that constructively. Because when I encounter someone who is basically like sold themselves body and soul, not to the Ukrainian people, but to the state mythos that treats the state and the people as the same into perpetuity, even if one turns against the other, I don't have a way to see that as like, oh, you're the Russia within, so to say. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that about anyone in particular, but it's like that's effective reaction on my end.
But this is the reason I say everyone's a fascist, and I mean myself as well. Like, the reality is what we're invested in and how we're invested, where that surfaces, how it surfaces, our personal, our external investments in any of these things. Mm-hmm. They come out in a lot of ways that I think we need to give room to humanity for. When that's done cynically, it's a different beast. Thus the Dylan Burns.
Well, how about it can be done cynically, but it can also be done viciously in ways that aren't cynical. Like, it can be done in ways that are self-aggrandizing. It can be done in ways that are narcissistic. It can be done in ways that are indeed cowardly.
Sure, like, but if it doesn't have the self-awareness around it, I put all those in the same basket.
I would agree with you up to the point where the question has been posed, because now the opportunity for self-awareness has arisen. And I think it is vicious for when someone gives you the opportunity to question your principles to make sure that they're valid, if you refuse to do that. Because that is a statement of cowardice, I would say. I
don't think so. I think I have a lot of room for people who find themselves backed into a corner and dig their heels in. I have empathy for that. I've done that. I get doing that. I think.
I don't believe I backed someone into a corner, though, is the thing.
I don't know if you have. I don't care about who you have. I'm not having a discussion about a specific person.
I agree.
But you just said in response to this, them doing that. And it's like, well, that's how it works.
But here's the thing, though. That's not how I work.
But who specifically then are you talking about? If it's not kind of
Well, I'm
generally
talking-
what I'm talking about. I thought you were talking about generally.
Well, no. I'm not talking about the average person you find on the street. I'm talking about the person for whom this has been brought up in conversation right now. Hey, I think while being fully behind Ukraine and fully on the side of Ukraine, I think there are potentially serious ethical problems that need to be looked at with how the Ukrainian people are being treated in the course of this war, and how the war itself is being used as a way to justify abuse of people for the benefit of other people.
Right.
And I think one of the problems is that when that is immediately shielded from interrogation because people will not countenance
But
any criticism.
let me just
go on,
ask,
please.
who's stopping you?
What do you mean?
Who's like, do it? I guess would
Do
be the
what?
thing. Like, do the critique, do the thing. Dylan Burns and him shitting on it. Like, if we're talking about Dylan
Yeah.
Burns, I kind of fuck that guy. I don't like.
I am. We're only talking about this because people didn't like that I did that.
but they didn't like it. Is it that they didn't like it, or that they stopped you?
Well, neither. It's that they didn't like it. They were closed-minded about it, and then they didn't stand on business. I hate that phrase. They didn't stand on business and defend the position. They kind of just fucked off. You know?
Right. So they do that a lot.
That's it. I'm not complaining.
So cool.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. They have the right to do that. I'm going to be rude to them though when we talk about it, but that's about it. Like I'm not going to like. I'm not here complaining about this.
Right. Well,
like
that's
they
what
have
I'm
the
trying to
right
figure
to
out
do
is
that.
the polemic against Dylan Burns in his position is one thing.
Yes.
Yes. There's a lot of other side conversations that I'm trying to parse and understand who's like, this is, the response was negative. I think the response was silly, generally speaking, in terms of like how negative it was for what you're saying. I think, again, you have a prickly side. I do too. So fucking, I get it.
Oh, and to be clear, I did ban Lucy from the Discord. She can talk to me anytime. I haven't prevented her from talking to me, but continue.
Interesting. Interesting. This is one of the reasons I don't have banning privileges on the QC. Everyone else does that.
I used to not, but people had busy stuff come up. So for the time being,
trust me, I empathize. We have people in there that I want to fucking get rid of that we put up for vote, and it takes like 2 fucking weeks.
Name them, coward. Sorry. Go
on. They know who they are, and a couple of them are in this fucking chat. But
remember Suresh. I'm your friend at the end of the day, okay? Not this bearded. Sorry, go on.
But like the underlying, the response in general and the discussion around it, I think, can be done by doing the affirmative action, which would be, here's what Ukraine's doing. Here are the things. Like, there's getting gross, and there's a few other people there. Like,
I don't think Dingros even needed the vote. I think he just got banned as a matter of course.
Oh no, that was like a 3. It took 3 votes of everyone doing it over and over and having discussion, and then there was a bad comment made, and that's the way it went. Timing. But again, I think doing the act and saying, okay, cool. I would encourage, if I could, and I'm happy to help with this because I think it's an interesting project. Here is what Ukraine is actively doing. Here is where they're doing things that are not under risk, which is, I think, specifically the phrasing that needs to be considered. When you're talking about, again, tanks are rolling into province X or Kiev, and they're on their way. Hands off, like, I don't want to say hands off, but it's like, what they do is what they do in response. And I think they should have been a lot harsher. But now that we're years past, now that there is a level of stability that may be shaky as much, here are the things that are not at risk right now that are being fucked with. Here are the parts where people are being fucked with. Here's where industry is being empowered in certain ways. Here's where the defense contractors are showing up and starting to manufacture and then resell weapons elsewhere, which is the Israel, Korea, Japan, Philippines mentality. And that kind of thing, I think, talking through, here's where these issues are, here's where there's room, here's what could be done about them. I think there's a very, very useful conversation.
I agree. I don't like moral arguments generally, because they presume commitments in common that are just never to be actually that shouldn't be taken for granted. And they're always a shorthand for that, or a way of obscuring the fact that there isn't one. I wonder if you'd entertain the crude conversation, the unnuanced one first, and then sort of return to this. I agree basically with virtually everything you said in this conversation. I can't actually think off the top of my head. Maybe some came up. I can't remember, if that's the case, of anything I had a substantive disagreement with. I just keep coming back to this. If somebody wants to leave Ukraine, they should be allowed to leave Ukraine.
Yes, but there's a side to that for me. This you want nuance, crude. I totally agree in principle. However, if they decide not to let people leave Ukraine, I get it.
Well, I wouldn't moralize about that, but I would say they don't have a right to win that contest. Does that make sense?
Right to win that contest.
If they object to the human leaving Ukraine, and the human succeeds in leaving Ukraine, I don't think there is an injustice that needs to be balanced at the end of that equation. Which I think you sort of agree with out of hand, because I don't think you agree that there's such a thing as justice. But leaving that aside, if there was, I don't think it would be on the Ukraine state's side. I think it would simply be a matter of, hey,
I don't think that matters. And to me,
agree.
the thing that, again, I can only respond by sort of bringing up something that's less metaphorical or allegorical, and more just how I see the difference between state action and the reality of things on the ground. I don't believe in the death penalty. I fundamentally don't believe in the death penalty. I think it's disgusting. I think if the state executes anyone, it's horrifying. Fundamentally that thing. However, if I was on a jury of a dad who killed the guy who killed his daughter, beat him to death with a club,
you probably give him.
I'd totally let him go. There's a difference between when people are doing things and what it means on the ground and how it works versus the cold theory ideal way that things are done. That I give more room to that. Not against
the giving room part. The giving room part, I'm on board with you with. There is a flip side where I give no room to people who give no room. You get me? I give no room to people who make it their mission to shame Ukrainian, or to
but again,
or to shame Ukrainians
this is one of those things that's I have all of my Ukraine. I shouldn't say all. I can name two. The people I know in Ukraine have a majority of them, but I can name them to a person. I won't do that. Enough of them have a nationalist.
What was that?
I was sneezing. Sorry.
That was a weird ass sneeze. I don't know if it's just the microphone.
Might be the microphone. I have each one of them. I can talk about varying levels of, they would say coward too. And a lot of it is dependent on a few different things, and I don't fault them for it.
I would not fault a Ukrainian for that.
But again,
I would fault anyone who is not, bluntly. Anyone who does not at some intrinsic level.
But this is the problem. What does it mean to be Ukrainian then? Because if the state, and we know the state isn't real, if you're tied emotionally to various people, I'll tell you, let me finish.
All right.
Someone who lives right on the other side of the border of country X and knows people and is emotionally invested as if they're the people there, because the border is just a line on the ground and the rest of it kind of doesn't matter. I kind of get that. Someone like Dylan Burns,
but
less so. Someone who's never been there and someone who knows nobody there, I think it's weird. But again,
there is with the benefit of distance, I don't need to make those fine-grained distinctions because I'm not near the border and I don't talk to people who are on just the other side of the border of Ukraine. Here's what I would say though: for the kind of person who can be picked out by the state to be sacrificed for it, those people can make that statement, and I will not agree but I will treat them with grace, right? For a Dylan Burns type or someone over here or someone who has to go over there willingly, it's a different story. They aren't caught in the same net.
I would be
They
very
are free. They
this
have a
is, to me,
luxury that those people don't have.
This is one of those things that I think those clear lines, and I get,
you know what I
mean.
can I
don't think those clear lines are as clear as you think they are.
Can I give another really assholey analogy sort of related to slavery?
How many times do you think it's a good idea for you to be an asshole?
Just hear me out for a second.
Do you want me to mute?
In America, in America, in America, this is a really ass. In America, it is very common for conservatives to blame economic disparities on racial grounds.
Yes.
For example,
black culture.
On black culture, black fathers disappearing, students not trying in school, black mothers being, etc., and so on and so forth. Now, that being said, even though that is completely illegitimate, black parents absolutely tell their children, go the fuck to school, don't knock somebody up, etc., etc. The same way my parents told me that. They absolutely do that. It's a matter of place, right? There are people who have the right to say that to black people, and that's black people. There are people who don't have the right to say that, and that's people who don't have that situation, who aren't implicated in the kinds of things that specifically affect some people against others. Same with Ukraine. I think Ukrainians, the people around the border and so on and so forth, and the people for whom like this is a thing, like, yeah, those people, yeah, you can have that conversation, and I would agree with that. I think for someone like me, it would be ridiculous. I think for someone like Dylan, it's ridiculous. I think for someone in a different part of Europe, frankly, it's ridiculous. I think for someone who has the freedom to go in and then go out, it's ridiculous. Right? Because like there are reasons why people have the outcomes. It's not because of the choices that they make. It's because of the situations that they are born into and that they are stuck in. And then within that framework, within those constraints, people can give you advice who have some common ground with you that can make your outcome better or worse. But that's not for other people who don't share that to dictate to you. Does that make sense? And it is low stakes for me. The stakes for me are not like Ukraine. My conversations about this don't affect Ukraine. My conversations about this affect the people around me and how they think. And the part that affronts me and affects me is I see like a thing that seems to be really effective at making people like not think or be reasonable anymore. Like it shuts something that I take to be sort of core value down.
I think
like
there's also,
yeah, go on.
And again, this is where
Braveheart speech over.
Yeah, the thing for me is the inability for us to have exploratory conversations and
yes, ideas. I agree.
And I think the thing we don't want to have happen, and again, this is a thing that's very difficult to tell the difference between. It's why, again, I have a lot more empathy for people who do shut the situation down, is how to put it.
I don't think it's a matter
to go back to the Civil War.
It's a matter of me not having time.
Y'all keep bringing up Civil War, black people, all this slavery. Let's talk about it. One of the things that's really interesting is that very often, early on, when we teach children, pre-high school about slavery, is we say that like the Civil War was about slavery. Yeah. And then in later high school, early university, you start realizing and learning that actually the Civil War was because of very complex economic issues between various territories and landowners, and the way that countries interacted.
Well, more specifically, between
I'm not done. Yeah. I'm not done. The way that these countries interacted and the way land was being exchanged and various industries dealt with each other, as well as interpersonal state politics inside of the whole thing. And then when you get into like your doctoral degree, you learn all those things were because of slavery. Yeah. That's the joke of nuance. And it is true of almost everything, that the way that we would explain a thing to a child, it is all the way to the end. It is actually the same as the complex answer, but the complex answer has more to it.
Well, but here's the catch though. It doesn't just have more to it. what's been disguised, though, is there's an asymmetry between these two theses because they're expressed the same way. The Civil War being for slavery, as in what was being fought about was the institution of slavery, is different from the Civil War as being fought because of economic relations that are downstream from a dependency on slavery. And those two can both be expressed by the Civil War was because of slavery, but they mean radically different things. It's not like it comes around on the other end of the horseshoe. It's like, oh, it was really this all the time. It was a simple answer you got, just, with the benefit of, you're at the end of the Hegelian dialectic. It's like, no, this is a radically different thing that implicates both sides negatively. And
Govind, never make that fucking comment on my channel again. That is not a slur we allow in any way. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what race you are. You don't use the C word. I don't give a shit if you're fucking FD Signifier himself. He can fuck himself.
He called me Canadian, didn't he?
No, he made a comment about Candace Owens.
Oh,
we don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, dude.
I thought I had like 4 or 5 fucking mods in the channel. You motherfucker.
There are, okay. To be clear, there is a culture of
Pippa's like sitting here shitting all over you. Come on, Pippa. You're a fucking mod. The fuck.
Okay, to be clear, there. It is different if it's a black dude using that. The cultural.
I don't give a shit. No, I do not give a shit.
I agree. No. Hear me out. I agree. Unacceptable for the chat. I am going to say though that it's a different gesture. Okay. I don't even know why I'm bothering.
I think otherizing people based on perceived cultural identity is disgusting.
I agree. I've made that critique. I'm just saying it's normalized in a way where there's a level of...
1 second, Lisa. I just made you a mod, literally, as you said that.
Okay.
Do you want me to take it away from you, Lisa? I will not leave Pippa alone. Pippa should have caught that.
Lisa's like that, okay? You're getting what you pay for here.
But it's I don't know if you saw the latest FT Signifier. Someone sent it to me and I was like, no.
Oh, which one? The debate or?
No, he had a big conversation getting back on that C word train because that's,
it was weird. He was talking about, did you see his panel discussion where they were like collectively calling the Irish complicit with American imperialism?
Dude, I can't mentally handle a lot of things.
It was like, Ireland is like the only country that has like a consistently like aggressively Israel critical stance. Where they actually want to sanction it.
Actively going out of their way to support Palestine in every way that they can as a country.
They are probably the most pro-Palestine, white-looking country that exists, bluntly. And it's like... And the funny part about it is I don't think that was FD Signifier having that idea. It's just one other person in the panel just brought it up, and because he has no idea what planet he's on, he just adopted it. It was just like, oh my god, man. You don't need to talk about this. Anyways.
And again, this is where I have my lines. Everyone's got their lines. That's fine. Underneath this, like when we're talking about how people react to things, how people set up and how people work, like I give people room.
I agree with you and I understand and respect that stance. I believe that giving people room is a positive statement in and of itself in a certain context. And so for me, I'm not disagreeing with you about that. For me, I have trouble like locating when I'm okay with the statement that is being made by giving specific. And so like I believe our words don't just perform actions, they also are actions. That was a dumb, redundant thing to say. I believe our words are actions, okay? And that includes like when you are gentle with someone who is resisting any conversation, questioning, frankly, the compulsion to murder and to be murdered of somebody else. I consider that person about whom that conversation is being had, and I don't feel like it's my job to give room to the person who's defending them being sent to their death against their will. I feel like my job is to give push back against that really hard. And like to that end, like I'll be reasonable with people, like I'll argue about it, but I'm also not going to be nice about it. Like I'm not going to be like gentle there. I think my job in that case is to shock and to push and to make it uncomfortable. And maybe you disagree with that, and that's fair.
Look, I think,
and I'm not even necessarily sure I agree with that fully. I like it's partly an explanation of a reaction. I'm not
and again,
like a doctrine here.
No, there's being impassioned and being polemic about any of these things. This is stuff that matters. And again, this is why these things, again, the language used, all of it, it took me a little bit to kind of find my way around some words used. I'll just put it that way.
Sure.
And I think, again, the underlying thing that's important is, as I started going, okay, well, Sunday's saying this, let's find out who else is making this critique. And it's like, I found 2 or 3 books and like 1 or 2 articles. And it's like,
there's like nothing.
There's like nothing. And it's, the books aren't even that as a thing.
Yeah. It's fucking terrifying. And I'm not by the way, I'm not going to say that I did a very good job, because I didn't. I think I've been tired and high strung, and like, yeah.
Join the club. Again, this is, I give people room. Like I tend to think of it that way. And I think it's important, because when we're talking about stuff that is about, and especially among people who are caring about the future of major things, how do we talk about stuff? How do we discuss? Anytime you see that reaction, the moralistic language, which is fundamentally what I saw with Dylan Burns and all of his ilk doing, that it's moralistic, resentment-based bullshit. Anytime you see that, it should be a warning light, and it should make everyone go, hey, wait a second. Why are we here? What are the principles we're for? Yeah. What are the things we care about? Because morals isn't the thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I also fixated on things that were, like, I think they're important, but I think in terms of the discussion that I was having and what was important to that discussion, they were secondary. And I fixated on them because I was emotionally impacted by my thinking about it.
Yeah, and again,
that was unwise. So I don't disagree with you there.
I don't even think necessarily it was unwise. I think you exist and we exist in a really weird place, which is being polemic and being someone who makes statements, and as such, you're going to get responses. That's the way it goes. And you're going to say things that are overstated or understated or wrong here or whatever. And all you can do, in my opinion, is model the behavior and response you want of that.
Yeah.
That's all I think you can do. And I think the continued behavior in a positive direction of finding ways to discuss these things and have these discussions, that's the point. And to me, that's the big thing that would be great. Because I want to figure out, here's a question. This is a real one. There is not a lot of history of countries that have resources, people, and are bordered with someone who's ostensibly an enemy in some capacity of a Western nation that doesn't go this direction.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm not saying there's inevitability or destiny or anything, but how can you possibly affect this in a way that becomes more positive? Because that's the thing where it's like...
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, and this is one of the reasons why the lack of books on this is disturbing. I mean, it's strictly speaking, there's not a lack of books about this. There's a lack of books in the particulars about this. I think societally we are folding on this issue in particular. I think this is entraining us to be permissive of certain dogmatic ideological ways of thinking about this kind of thing. I think, and especially as I read more things, one of the horrifying realizations is just like how much behind conversations that were being had like close to a century ago we collectively are generally. Because like all of these debates have been had, this whole thing has happened again.
The entire idea of the military industrial complex, like fundamentally,
or even prior to that, frankly,
I think we can start there, because the reality of the statement comes from like it's a famous speech Eisenhower gave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the thing that was really interesting to me is, yes, this was the setup that was like a lot of people were like, oh my God, he's stating this. But the problem was like the original draft of it, the story goes that he was given an original draft that called it the Military Industrial Congressional Complex.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the actual original naming of it. It's MICC.
Interesting.
And Eisenhower removed congressional for obvious goddamn reasons. He didn't want himself and other people implicated in particular ways, as if the body politic had nothing to do with it. It's really strange. The second thing is that the speech actually goes into the way that public policy would be captured by the technological elite, right? Which is fundamentally where we are. Think tanks and contractors and all that shit run everything. And Eisenhower, despite making this speech, his defense posture basically blew out the industry that he was then critiquing. Like he built the thing. So obviously there's a lot of complexity around what was said, how it was said, where it was said. Even then, the complexity around it wasn't really spoken of in a really big way.
Yeah. I think the first thing, frankly, is people need to start normalizing discourse that sidelines the state, just generally sidelines any of these big cell structures that act as a way to mobilize human beings against each other for artificial reasons that don't actually have to do with their actual on the ground connections, but deploy sort of the illusion of them to make them think.
But I don't believe in that.
Each other for reasons.
Like your phrasing around it being the illusion is where I'm going to have, this is like, and this is, you want to talk about fucking nerd theory, fucking conversations, but like, again, this goes back to, I think, how people are invested in things. It is not that we consider and think about the state. The state is as real to people as it is not real to you and I.
It 100% is. However, you do teach children, and they are receptive to this, that when you look at a panorama of like a rainforest, they see trees and they see birds and they see clouds and they see rainbows. The rainbow exists in a different way relative to your perception of the other elements of that picture, even if they all in the visual panorama before you appear to occupy space. They are different. One of these things is rooted in the relationship between your eyeball and the stuff out and the stuff that's reflecting light. The other one, if you were to walk towards it, there is resistance that you would find. It would actually occupy a stable part of your world. It's not merely perspectival in that way. Now, of course, the upshot is actually they are all perspectival in that way, but there's differences of degree here. And I think people absolutely can change their perspective on this in such a way as that they recognize first, not such and such a nationality or a country or an ideology or a people or whatever, but they recognize like the needfulness of organic communities on the ground that are connected with each other, and you prioritize that. Not from a top-down perspective, as in the way Russia is trying to weaponize the prevalence of like Russian speaking, for example, in Ukraine as a justification for stealing their children. But in the sense of like, when you see like a top-down thing come in, there is a cultural resistance to that. That is a thing that is difficult to do. That has to be earned. And in some places that has succeeded in small measure. Not in a way that's been like prolific, but like it's as a proof of concept. Communities have managed to resist things in that way, and that's largely been broken down. Largely, a lot of those communities that you will see that have managed to do this have been either framed as or have been actively pushed into being just raw criminal insurgencies that are predatory on their people as well. I can think of like any number of insurgencies in the Middle East, certain groups even in America, and so on and so forth. But I think that's kind of where things need to go. There needs to really be a move away from moralizing about big bubbles with names on them. You know what I'm saying?
Let me try to restate it slightly differently.
Go for it.
Given that the state is an ideal category and exists only in the molar as a representational space of a large aggregate of people inside of an average geological or ethical or genealogical or cultural boundaries. The idea that in discussion, we would treat the state itself as a thing which we should be invested in, should be done away with. And instead, we should actually dissolve more or less the idealist, materialist, either or, that the state is imaginary or that the state is real. And instead, the apparent, to me, this is how I look at it, the apparent ideality is itself material operations with material effects. And so as such, we need to do away with the representational investment directly in the state and have the argument begin elsewhere and discussions begin elsewhere. This is, I don't know if you've read it, but Libertine Blanc's book, it's what I pulled up a little bit. It's dense. Anytime you've got Deleuze, Guattari, and Marx inside of a single book, it's not a fun time. But the thing is, making the state the center of our arguments is not leftism. That's fascism. That's reactionary representational politics. But ignoring the state or pretending that the state isn't a primary a driver of people is a big deal. This is the choice that anti-Oedipus fundamentally and A Thousand Plateaus and Deleuze and all of them reject as category error. The way that the state functions and the way that it works, it is almost, they call it a double excess. It has its apparatuses and it also has excess over its own concept. You can't reduce it to materiality. You can't reduce it to ideality. It doesn't work. It moves between them. And that movement is actually what gives it the apparent existence that we're talking about.
But here is the catch. The apparent existence of the state doesn't necessarily track the actual thing that is being spoken of when we insist upon the state, which I agree is a thing. But for example, you talk about the molar.
But
for instance. Well, in some cases, that is actually located elsewhere than where the state as such is actually postulated in discourse. There are states, for example, where none of the power comes from within it, none of the legitimacy comes from within it, and its actions and so on and so forth are entirely dictated by outside forces, to the point where literally the only reason why we're talking about it is because this is sort of a crystallization of disputes between other parties, other powers, right? Even, for example, hypothetically, and you could have seen this take place if, for instance, a two-state solution was agreed upon that wasn't actually a two-state solution. You would have a territory called a state. People even argue about it as if it has the rights of a state, but it would be policed and governed and so on and so forth by the United States through Israel, or the Israel through the United States, whatever you want. It would have no control over its diplomacy. It would have, and so on and so forth, but it would still, quote unquote, be a state. It would, even insofar as it occupies a place of resistance to Israeli hegemony, normatively be defended as a state by a whole bunch of other countries, and invasions on its borders might actually be successfully resisted. However, in strict terms, when you talk about Israel versus this Palestinian state, they would not be the same kind of thing. And moreover, there are broader things beyond that would potentially overlap them both. And those would function more as states than Palestine does. Does that make sense? So it's like one of the things that I think is really important is that, like, it's not that we get rid of the state. It's that, like, the thing that we name as the state, it's sort of like when we name seas that are actually open-ended to the rest of the ocean. To a certain extent, we should not do that. We shouldn't, like, talk about those things as if they are self-contained. And I think one of the problems is that when we talk about the state, we tend to presume self-containment based on what state is named. You know what I mean? That which bears the name.
But the problem is, so there's a difference in that the ocean that we may name doesn't actually visit violence as a thing. And states do actually.
I think there are a lot of people who would fundamentally disagree with that, but okay.
I don't. The state fundamentally has violence as part of its setup. The rule of law itself is supposedly an alternative to this raw violence that exists. That's how people commonly talk about it, but that's actually not true. The law must regulate violence by violence first being a thing that can be stripped of everyday meanings. This is Marx talks about this, the way that violence itself is naked. Zizek actually has a really great book on this called Violence, where the reality is that the social meaning of violence needs to be stripped and become its own sort of transcendent thing. And what the legal order does, again, this is why the death penalty I find tasteless versus the the vendetta a father may have that he visits. The legal world needs to operate on violence as such, which means that we have to take violence and make it abstract. It's a movement that has to happen as part of the state apparatus as we exist. This is archi-violence. And then the secondary thing the state does is within capture of the violence. States aren't really a thing that we define, again, as I understand it, as I talk about it, as a thing that's built by propaganda, as a thing that's built by repression or ideology. It is not defined by the things that it makes you think. It is defined by rent, property, and tax.
I agree.
That's it. Those are the three things. But this is not just purely the literal money sort of side of things. These have to be, and all of these presuppose the way that each of these elements is produced. Okay. So, when we do a survey of land, renting land, however it's set up, you are presupposing that land can be measured, that you can survey, that you can do these things. Profit presupposes that two activities can be compared by labor time or whatever the fuck you want to call it. All of these things, we presume these elements that are built in there, these are all imaginary things, right? But imaginary things don't survive disbelief, and no one has belief in a state. That's not a thing that exists really within capital. The state is able to survive the disbelief of it. And it's a really fascinating interaction.
Because like what happens though, is become invested in the elements of the imaginary. And then when belief in that has died, their investments remain, so they still enforce the same relationship. That's why
but that's what I mean is it's not.
No, but here's I'm agreeing with you up to a very specific, but I think crucial point. And it's this. That very real thing you're describing does not track the contours of named states in the international system, kind of things that we attribute patriotism to, for example. It can, but it doesn't always. And very frequently, it doesn't at all. And the patriotism is invoked after the fact to rationalize. Well, it does a little bit, because it changes like it changes like what the elements of play are on the board. Like it changes the world you're in.
But again, you're talking about the state as imaginary thing. It's irrelevant to the state.
I'm not saying it's state as imaginary thing. State is a very real thing, super real,
but
very real. But
that's the other side. Is it's not belief is irrelevant to the state existing.
I agree. However, there is adjacent to, simultaneous to, the state really existing. There is also the image of the state that doesn't correspond to them. Am I making sense? And it's with respect to that image of the state that we have things like, for example, notions of mythic loyalty or belonging to the nation state and so on and so forth. That is where that takes place. But that doesn't track the actual the real relationships of power and violence that make up the actual state that is actually there. And I mean, case in point, you're talking about, like, for example, relations of property and so on and so forth, defense of property, production of property. That often takes place in violation of the rules and the norms that are associated with the sort of imagistic state that normies talk about. We talk about Canada, the United States, Israel, Palestine, whatever. Not that Palestine's a state, but you get what I'm saying. That is representative of a real state structure, the kind of thing that has a genealogy, like, with ancient power structures prior to even thinking about states. But go on.
Right. I would disagree in the sense that the thing that makes this, like, just to put a fine point on it, sovereign citizens go to jail for not paying taxes.
True.
And they could be complete believers in that. It doesn't matter.
But billionaires do not.
They can.
But they don't.
They have. It has happened.
Yeah, but they can be known to have violated the law, and like it is different. Like, to be clear, like, no human body is absolutely immune from being caught up in any of these systems. But there is a difference. A sovereign citizen attempts to use the writ of the law under the mistaken belief that the law is enforced by the interpretation of language by like a community of equals, and it is not, for example, like a shorthand guide for people who have actual power, like the ability to interpret, the ability to make leaps or to ignore things under certain conditions, the ability to be arbitrary, bluntly, which is their
Right,
job.
but
That's why we
again,
have judges. Yeah,
these are you're talking about things in a way that isn't. There are a number of people who've been worth $1 billion who have spent significant time in prison or are currently spending significant time in prison.
yeah.
So,
But it's not because they were caught, which is
it
important.
literally is because they were caught.
No, it's not because they were caught, because people were pointing it out and calling it out for a very long time before there was sufficient social pressure to mobilize something. I think Epstein's a great case in point, actually. A lot of these people, like, being caught means different things depending on who you are, right? Like, that's important. There are people who have engaged in treasonous actions. There are people who have engaged in, like, obviously illegal actions. There are people currently in the leadership of your country who have done
Right,
so.
but this is not
Yeah.
the same. This is not having the conversation of whether or not the state has impact or whether or not belief
The
matters.
state does have impact. What I'm saying is that the thing that is believed in as the state by people who talk about states is not the state. The state exists, but it isn't that. It overlaps, but they aren't the same. It's like the difference between I don't know. Trying to think of an example. It's like a river and an ocean, right? Like,
This is where I think there's an interesting longer conversation to be had here. This is one of the things, the chapter on the Erstat, which go to Anti-Oedipus, anti-oedip.us, and you can see my new translation of Anti-Oedipus. It's lovely. Find the section on the Erstat and go read, because it's the way they talk about it and what a state is and how it reorganizes how people consider things, how people talk about things, the temporal structure that is underneath all of this as it functionally works. We can talk about the actual mode of history that the state operates in any given time. It did this or didn't do this, but it is real social processes, and they have fantasy-shaped temporality. That's great as a finding of how they work, but that does not change the fact that they aren't absolutely material. And as such, the reality of what it means to be part of a state or be underneath a state is significantly powerful for people.
well, I think a key part of this too is this language of under a state, right? So when you're talking about the Erstat, for example, you are talking about something that emerges under a context in which between states there is space. We don't live in a world in which there is space between states. And I'm not just talking in terms of the drawing of borders. I mean, they encroach upon each other economically, socially, and so on and so forth. The actual mechanisms of power don't obey borders or jurisdiction. That's not how it works. They don't even obey oceans. Some of them cross those. And in fact, a lot of them cross those. And so, like, one of the things go on. Well, one of the things you're talking about when you're talking about, like, states, for example, is, like, for many quote unquote states, their sovereignty, their independence, their existence as states, as is commonly what states are commonly understood to be, is fundamentally illusory. It's an artifact of the international system that names them as states, but they aren't really the same thing. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that there is, in addition to this, a discrepancy between the kinds of things that enter our discourse as states and the kinds of things that the word state, as we use it substantively, actually are. They aren't in the same place. Like, they literally refer to different parts of the world.
I would comment that any fantasy that may exist that has material effects is as real as anything that is not a fantasy.
I agree. I 100% agree.
And the state's the textbook case of this.
Well, I think the state is doubled, though. I think the way we talk about the state is there's the state and there's the state. And I think the state that we talk about, more often than not, like when we're talking about Ukraine, we aren't talking about the state. We're talking about the thing that is drawn on the map as the territory of the state, and then we sort of do a leap of associating that with the authority and structure of the state. But you can, if you actually went and looked at it, you would see very quickly that no, actually, there is a point beyond which you're just looking at ground. There is nothing there. And so, nonetheless, we talk about, for example, territorial integrity.
That's where I have the problem.
Okay, go on.
What does that mean that there's nothing there? There is that. There is there. The state has effect in a billion different ways.
Yeah, but it also doesn't have effect in a billion different ways where it is attributed to have constant ongoing effect, right? So the state has a monopoly, for example, legitimate use of physical violence. A lot of people just on board that naive. There's a lot of places in Ukraine where it doesn't do it. And I'm not talking about places that are contested by Russia. I mean places where...
Oh, no, you're talking about the contingent reality of what it means on the ground. Doesn't make Ukraine as a state less real, though.
I agree.
It's understanding.
I agree. I'm not saying the state isn't real. I've been insistent. Both of these states, the doubled one and the quote-unquote actual state, the robust state that we're really talking about, these are both real. They're just named the same thing.
Well, so then...
But they're different.
So then the discussion moves to... I'm just trying to move it to that next thing then. Mm-hmm. It's about whether or not we utilize the representational element of state in order to talk about a thing as if it is a single whole body, full body, filled up thing that is defined and set rather than the mechanization and mechanics of a series of incredibly complex interworking.
Well, here's the number one problem.
Things.
Yeah. Here's the number one problem. The state in the robust theoretical sense, which actually does really exist in a super concrete sense, is fundamentally a relationship of power and administration. It doesn't actually have spatial limits or any sort of fixedness. Like that part does, you think of it as like a squid, basically. That's shape. When you're talking about, and that is not self-aggrandizing. And anyway, when you're talking about the state as it is discussed in international relations, when you talk about the land and integrity of borders and the territory and things of that sort, and even things that we tend to associate with theoretical notions like the monopoly on violence, which is implying a similar like territoriality, like that is completely different from that first thing. Both of those things can perpetuate independently of each other. You can have a region called Ukraine whose autonomy is protected from the outside, but where that administrative structure is on the moon. Like literally on the moon. It could be governing from a different place where the people can't touch it. That's completely valid. Yes. That's sort of the relationship that a lot of countries abroad from America have with America, where they're sort of, to a certain extent, more or less doing the bidding of powers in America, but they're also sovereign. They also don't police their borders and don't control who goes where, and there's no actual serious integrity. But
you want to talk about the nuance. The nuance of what we're doing is you're talking about literally where I differ and I disagree with James C. Scott.
I'm not talking about James C. Scott. I'm talking about...
I know you're not, but you're basically making a significant play in that same direction.
I very strongly disagree.
Really?
I think, I don't think James Scott's issue primarily was with the identity. I don't take this as being a critique that Scott even really necessarily levies. I think what Scott is primarily doing...
Just let me state real quick, because for me,
Please.
The way I read Seeing Like a State is that he has a suspicion of state as category. It's not really apologia fundamentally, but he has this suspicion on at a basic level that
maybe he does. Maybe he does.
The state is producing the surface it operates on, and as such, like it needs to be considered only within that realm. It's not, but he's suspicious of state as thing.
I would disagree to a point, not because I wouldn't like positively say he's not suspicious of the state. I have to think about that. But I think
I think he's suspicious of the state.
Perfectly possibly. I can't think of a definitive statement where he says as such. I think the main point, though, the main thrust of Seeing Like a State is sort of like what Descola says when he describes the view of the non-human the view of the world rather from the perspective of peoples that don't observe the Western division of nature and culture is as the human as the what's the language he uses? The human as the condition
Mhm.
of perception or something like that. He sees the state that way. The state has particular arms. The state has particular like modes of practice, and through those, it constructs the world around it in ways that fail because the world does not correspond to that model. In a similar way to how like humans are pointed out to do the exact same thing in Nietzsche and Bergson and so on and so forth. I think it's essentially what his move is, where it's like top down order makes sense from the perspective of something whose entire existence is based upon looking in from the outside, categorizing, making legible from the surface, and so on and so forth. But when you actually pay attention to sort of the underground ways in which order is actually emergent from the relations of things in time, sometimes in ways that you can't see, those top-down sort of cookie-cutter approaches actually end up being antithetical to the aims that they are put towards. You end up like making forests that don't grow. You end up making crime become worse because
this is
mechanisms. Yeah.
This is how I see Scott as being suspicious of state as category. The reason that the state is powerful and that it's dangerous is because legibility of the state is real. It is functional. It is there.
It is.
The state's capacity to remake reality in the image of its categories means that when it fucks that up, and like Scott gives a lot of examples, like that's basically this.
Well, I mean, this is why I'm a little bit skeptical of the state as such, because he also gives it its due credit. It also, for example, is very effective, like, for example, administrating health and hygiene and things of that sort. And those are good things. He endorses those.
But he's not wrong on that necessarily.
He's not. I agree with him.
All right, I gotta go. This was a great convo. I gotta go piss and I gotta go put my kids to bed. And I've streamed for
too long.
That's 9 hours, dude.
I could roam through these halls forever if you like. Be trapped in this mall together if you like. I'd love to explore the corners if you